Hello, everyone. My name is Tammy Britton, and I'm the Workforce Development Project Manager with Talent 2025. Today is the third and final session in Talent 2025's webinar series titled Commit to Hiring Returning Citizens. Session 3 will focus on retention and success for non-traditional employees, particularly formerly incarcerated individuals and/or individuals with a criminal background. This business decision can be the start to expanding your talent pool. A few additional housekeeping items before we get started. Please mute yourself if you are not already muted, and we will be taking time for Q&A towards the end of the session. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box at any time as they come to you. The agenda begins with an introduction to the topic from me. I will try to keep this portion as brief as possible in order to get to the employer stories. I will introduce you to Jason Kerr, President of Valley City Electronic Recycling, and Daniel Vandermolen in Talent Acquisition at Goodwill Industries of Greater Grand Rapids. They will tell you their approach to retention and success for non-traditional employees. We will then move into 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A with the audience. For those of you not familiar, allow me to give a brief introduction to Talent 2025 and the work of our Returning Citizens Committee. This committee is chaired by two of our member CEOs, Jason Kerr from Valley City Electronic Recycling and Mike Dykstra from Zeeland Lumber and Supply. The committee objectives, as you can see on the screen, are to increase the number of employers committed to hiring returning citizens and elevate the voice of business champions, raise awareness and highlight best practices for employers committed to hiring returning citizens, and increase the number of individuals exiting prison with a state-issued ID or a driver's license. Best practices for fair hiring have been highlighted throughout this webinar series. In July, we learned more about banning or moving the box. In August, we discussed the proper evaluation of criminal histories, and today we will focus on retention and success for non-traditional employees, including formerly incarcerated individuals. So let's briefly recap why now is the ideal time to commit to hiring returning citizens. The average unemployment rate in West Michigan in 2018 was 3.4%. Ottawa County had the lowest rate at 2.8%. In the bar graph on the right, we can also see a slow yet consistent increase in labor force participation. So we know that people are entering the workforce, yet talent remains hard to find. At the same time, formerly incarcerated individuals experience much higher rates of unemployment, with 75% remaining unemployed a year after their return home. So exclusionary hiring practices would further limit a company's ability to find quality talent. When formerly incarcerated individuals gain employment, recidivism rates go down, and the related ability to stay employed and in their communities and family structures benefits everyone. Over 92% of people who are employed shortly after leaving prison never return to prison. Here you can see some of the benefits that a business can gain by committing to hiring returning citizens. You can enlarge your local talent pool with qualified candidates, reduce recruiting costs, advance your company's diversity and inclusion initiatives, ensure compliance with local, state, and federal law, reduce turnover and increase productivity, and access tax credits and bonds. So companies are recognizing the advantage to hiring employees that have been involved in the criminal justice system. For example, at a company called Total Wine and More, human resources managers found that the annual turnover was on average 12.2% lower for employees with criminal records. These findings are also corroborated locally through the work done tracking retention and success by the 32-2 initiative, whose initial goal was to have 30 employers commit to hiring 2 returning citizens for 2 years and tracking their progress. If we think in terms of the stages of employment, we have pre-employment, including creating the job description and job posting, finding talent sources, and the application process. Here is where we can ban or move the box. We then move into the hiring process, which includes interviews, background checks, and the important step of properly evaluating criminal histories. Today, we focus on retention and success in the employment stage, with strategies included in onboarding, training and development, and tracking performance. A concern worth addressing for some employers is negligent hiring liability. However, in a survey by the Society for Human Resource Management, data shows that negligent hiring liability is not a considerable risk for employers engaged in fair chance hiring. particularly if the employers follow the state law and the EEOC guidance of individualized assessments. So let's explore some tools and resources for employers. For employers concerned about risk for a variety of reasons, there are resources available. Through the federal bonding program, funded and administered by the United States Department of Labor, fidelity insurance bonds are available to protect employers from loss of money or property sustained through dishonest acts of employees. Examples include theft, forgery, larceny, and embezzlement. There was also a recent expansion of Michigan's fidelity bonding program by a grant in the amount of $100,000. Funds will be targeted towards job seekers that are returning citizens, with an emphasis on those recovering from addiction, and further targeted towards accessing skilled trades training programs and promoting the bonding program. This is administered through Michigan Works agencies. West Michigan has a wealth of employee and employer supports for both returning citizens and their employers. A consistent theme throughout this webinar series is the need for flexibility, honesty, communication, and dedication. However, it's important to note that this applies to all employees regardless of the presence of criminal backgrounds. Additional resources and supports include some of the following: employer resource networks, such as the SOURCE or Business Resource Networks at Michigan Works agencies, Hope Network, Goodwill Industries of West Michigan, Goodwill Industries of Greater Grand Rapids, 70x7, Fresh Coast Alliance, Women's Resource Center, the Vocational Village at Hanlon Correctional Facility in Ionia, and the option to join a partnership for fair hiring, such as the 32-2 initiative. If these resources are not in close proximity to you, please reach out to me for connections more specific to your location. My email will be given at the end of the presentation. To wrap up the topic introduction, here is a summary of best practices for increasing your talent pool by committing to hiring returning citizens. Use inclusive language in job postings. Move the box off the application. Individual assessments of criminal histories, and targeted talent attraction, development, and retention efforts. All right, today I am joined by Jason Kerr, president of Valley City Electronic Recycling, and one of the CEO co-chairs for Talent 2025's Returning Citizens Committee, and Daniel Vandermolen, talent acquisition coordinator at Goodwill Industries of Greater Grand Rapids. So welcome to you both. And Jason, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your commitment to hiring formerly incarcerated individuals and what that means for retention and success at your company?
Sure. Thank you, Tammy. My name is Jason Kerr, and I am the president of Valley City Electronic Recycling. My company hires returning citizens. Just a little bit of a background how we got into that. To a certain extent, I inherited this model when I bought the company roughly 7 years ago. The previous owner employed a workforce of roughly 50% returning citizens and 50% traditional employees. At the time, I knew very little of returning citizens and really what that meant. I did know that it was the right thing to do and that everybody deserved a second chance, but that was kind of all that I knew about the topic. But what I learned pretty quickly was it seemed that the returning citizens seemed to stay in their jobs much longer. And I wasn't sure why. I thought maybe these traditional workers didn't value their jobs as much. Perhaps they figured if they quit or were fired, finding another job wouldn't be a big deal. Whereas the returning citizens, they understood a lot of the barriers it took to overcome. They had to work hard to get this job. And it really showed that they might have valued the job more. So it was kind of at this point when I realized this, when I really made a concerted effort that I was going to hire returning citizens whenever I might have vacancies. Now my process for this, I utilize a lot of the nonprofits in town like Hope Network and Goodwill to find this type of talent for me. We're a smaller company. We have 30 employees. We don't have a huge HR department to get this done. So I really lean on, the Hope Networks and the Goodwills of the world to do this heavy lifting. They do a tremendous job of pre-screening the applicants. Let's say, for instance, you don't want an applicant that has a violent conviction on their record, or you don't want an applicant that has a CSC on their record. They will go ahead and weed those candidates out and bring you candidates that kind of fit more what you're looking for. So then when I get these candidates in front of me, how I really sell Valley City and the jobs we have available I tell them, we're not a General Motors, we're not a Ford, we're not a big multinational where you're going to come in and work for 30 years and retire with a full pension. What we're really looking for are people that are going to do the little things, show up to work on a daily basis, on time. And then when you don't show up on time or don't show up, call us, let us know why. When you're at work, put in a good day's work, show week-to-week growth. We're just really looking for little things. And the time frame I tell them that we're looking for, we're only looking for, a year and a half, 2.5 year commitment. And in return, after that time period's up, hopefully they'll be left with some job history. And for a lot of these people, this is the most important thing because they're dealing with sometimes extreme resume gaps from being incarcerated, and nobody will give them the time of day. So after this 18 months, 2 years working with us, they've made some money, but they have this job history, which should be worth even more. And they're hopefully able to parlay it to bigger and better, higher paying jobs. Now, this work model has worked out pretty well for us. We've sent a lot of people on to bigger, better, higher paying jobs. We have had a couple of exceptions. We have 2 individuals currently working for us that have both been there 5+ years. Which is pretty outstanding when you think about it. But I've encouraged them because they could be making a lot more money elsewhere to bigger companies, but they have no desire to move. They're very comfortable. And I kind of get it. The reason being, these folks, this is 5 years is the longest they've ever worked in one job. 5 years might be longer than some of their longest personal relationships. So, the time for them is worth, that comfort level is worth more than a little bump in pay. So I appreciate their plight. But at the same time, it makes it harder for us to hire more people and give more opportunity because we are just a smaller employee. But part of the reason we're able to achieve this kind of retention, talk about employees that have been there 5+ years, we really spend a lot of time on the front end in the interview process. We will never hire somebody after the initial interview. We usually send them home with some homework, tell them to think about what we've talked about, and then follow up maybe 2 days later. It's amazing how many of these people will not call back 2 days later. It's these same people that were in my office 2 days prior saying they could start tomorrow, but give them a simple task and they won't follow up. So they pretty much work themselves out of the running just by failing to do so. We'll also run multiple interviews over the course of a couple of weeks. Varying times, just to see the commitment of these individuals to get to these places at different times, make sure they're punctual. If they can pass these kind of tests, you can usually gauge what kind of employee they're going to be. So spending time on the front end has really helped us out with increasing those retention numbers. When you get these individuals on board, you go through the hiring process and end up hiring them. You're going to have issues. It's not like returning citizens don't come without issues. Just like any other employee, just like traditional employees, they have issues. But their issues tend to be a little different. A couple of the issues that you might deal with, transportation is a huge issue. A lot of these individuals don't have driver's licenses for various reasons. A, they've been incarcerated for a long time. B, it just flat out got taken away. Or C, they're eligible to get one, but they don't have the money to pay the fine. So they're relying on other people to get them to and from work. They may have relatives or friends that can do that, but a lot of times it's out of their control. So a lot of times these folks are using the bus system. And when we relocated our business 6 years ago, it was very important for us to be on the bus line to help shorten that commute for these individuals. And that's worked out well. Another little thing we do is we have bus passes in the office. Sometimes, near the end of the week, these folks that ride the bus will come to you and say, yeah, I can't be to work tomorrow. I don't have money for a bus pass. Well, we have bus passes because it's a very cheap way for us to circumvent that. We can give them a bus pass at little cost to us and then still have them back at work the next day, where, quite frankly, they need to be and we need to be there. And then the last one I wanted to mention was court appearances. A lot of these folks will have numerous court appearances that they need to attend to. And this is one of those things, this is not optional. I mean, if they don't go, they can be back in prison, and that does not do anybody any good, employer or individual especially. So there's a component of flexibility that you have to have. But communication can trump all these issues, just like with traditional employees. Communicating at an effective level is extremely important. And I found working through some of these issues can be more rewarding, working through them with these returning citizens. There seems to be a tremendous level of appreciation when you help them solve these problems. And it's not always an outward appreciation. Sometimes you can just sense that the employee bond is strengthened. There's a little more loyalty there. And that all feeds into retention. So that's pretty important. Even with all these issues, I mean, employing returning citizens comes with a lot of benefits. We've really improved our diversity and inclusion in our workplace. When you're bringing people with different backgrounds and different ways of thinking to the workplace, it tends to create a unique perspective. And that unique perspective can lead to a different way of thinking that can really enhance your corporate culture. We have developed an extremely loyal, hardworking culture that's driven, through our employees and these returning citizens in particular. I would say that, if you're not currently employing returning citizens, I would ask that you at least open your mind to it. And further, I would say talk to someone. I mean, talk to someone that's currently employing returning citizens and see what their experience has been. See what the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm always willing to share our experience at Valley City. It's something I'm extremely passionate about because, hiring returning citizens, it's not just the right thing to do, because it is. But at this point, you can really make the business case for it. This will increase your retention. And through that, this increased retention will drive bottom line results. And at the end of the day, I mean, that's what a lot of people are looking for. So that's all I have today. Thank you.
Okay, Jason, I have just a quick follow-up question for you. I know that it sounds like you've gotten a lot of your information about best practices for hiring returning citizens through experience, but have you ever gotten any formalized HR-related training to hiring returning citizens?
I haven't, other than, consults with some attorney friends. Again, this is where we lean on people that are pros at this, like the Hope Networks, the Goodwills of the world. They're a little bit, not a little bit, this is more their sweet spot. So by the time I get these folks, a lot of those problems have been taken care of.
Okay, so they're fulfilling some of that human resource function for you.
Absolutely, okay. Yeah. And then there's other organizations like the Source that are tremendous in that kind of capacity as well.
Yeah, they're a great connector to different resources for returning citizens.
One other thing I wanted to quick touch on was one of the issues I failed to bring up was housing. So transportation, these court appearances are pretty big, but housing is another one that if you have it'll still happen with returning citizens. This can happen with anybody, but if you have an employee that's displaced from housing, that is a big problem, especially in the affordable housing market we're in right now in Grand Rapids. It's hard enough to find an affordable house, but for a returning citizen to do so is next to impossible. Landlords aren't really apt to rent to people with felonies. That's another scenario where we'll bring in a Goodwill, Hope Network, leverage their networks to help take care of some of those problems. So, you don't have to do this all on your own. There are a lot of good organizations out there that can help you with this.
Yeah, I like that thought of not having to do it all on your own, because I think, especially if you're just starting or just exploring, like the commitment to hiring returning citizens, it can seem daunting. You know, you're not even into the networks yet, let alone do you really fully understand them. So
Right.
yeah, I think that's great. Okay, Daniel, thank you to Jason, and Daniel, we're gonna transition over to you. So what is your perspective on retention and success with formerly incarcerated individuals working with Goodwill Industries?
Sure, thanks, Tammy. So first, Goodwill is in a unique position where we are able to provide services and also be an employer for individuals who are justice involved. So at Goodwill, we currently have 3 separate programs specifically designed to assist individuals. So we can definitely appreciate the importance and benefit of hiring returning citizens. From an impact standpoint, we have greatly benefited from hiring and retaining those individuals coming out of jail or prison. So we kind of have that firsthand knowledge of the situation. Specifically from a hiring standpoint, we have a number of different areas of employment available for those seeking to work at Goodwill, all of which have been touched in one way or another by someone who is justice involved. One area where we've had great success is at our main plant in Granville on Prairie Street. One of our leaders over there, Eric Reed, will be the first to tell you that returning citizens often make the best employees. Turnover is low, work hard, they're committed to their positions. And for some people, Goodwill is a long-term career choice. For others, it's a stepping stone to another job. So we see successes in both areas and are happy to be able to provide a valuable employment service for the community in both ways. The majority of our talent comes from 2 places. We get applications directly from our website. We also get referrals from our internal programs and then from external organizations. The community has come to know Goodwill as a place that provides a friendly environment for returning citizens. So we often receive referrals from other community agencies working with those who are justice involved. We make a concerted effort to go out and recruit employees from a diverse array of sources. This could be by attending a job fair put on by one of our diverse community partners, or advertising our jobs in a way that targets specific populations or lends itself to certain job roles. For example, we've taken advantage of Facebook jobs in order to create a way for people to apply for open positions. We found this helps not only returning citizens, but anyone who might be intimidated by a lengthy application process.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Is the application process on Facebook easy?
Yeah, so it is easier to go through. A lot of times you can just click one button and submit your information right through Facebook, getting information over there. Our online process right now, you do have to go through a pretty traditional application. We're looking to work on that right now and make it a little bit shorter and easier to apply. So we're conscious of, you know, the digital age and making things as new as possible and making it as easy for people to apply. So yeah, but we're able to utilize social media as one way to do that. So yeah, it's a great resource. So yeah, we take advantage of Facebook, and again, it helps out not just returning citizens, but anybody, you know, who might be looking to apply. Goodwill is also fortunate enough to be part of a collaboration known as the Employment Services Collaborative, which is a group comprised of 8 local agencies, which are to helping people, including returning citizens, find and maintain competitive employment in the Kent County area. Among the collaborative partners, a number have programs and services specifically designed to address the needs of those who have been justice involved. And the coalition of agencies was developed using the human-centered design process. So much of the service provision provided is a direct result of what they heard from those who access workforce development services in the community. So we're taking the needs and addressing the barriers of the individuals that we have personally talked to. For example, one partner, the Women's Resource Center, focuses their efforts on women just returning from jail. In addition to being a resource provider ourselves, we also work with Hope Network, the Hispanic Center, United Church Outreach Ministry, UCOM, and Jubilee Jobs, all of which provide support for returning citizens in their own unique ways. So like we touched on before, it's understanding that you don't have to do everything. You can provide one very specific type of assistance and be really great at that, and then find community partners who fill in the service gaps that you might not be able to provide. We might provide career coaching at Goodwill for someone who's unsure of how to talk about their record or help address the items listed on their background check. It might be a hindrance to their finding employment. Again, we talked about the application process and the interview process, and it might just be for somebody, how do I talk about the gap in my employment, or how do I talk about what's showing up on my background check? So working holistically, we're able to provide great results in a number of areas for individuals who were justice involved. Also at Goodwill, we look at each of our prospective employees as an individual with different stories to tell. And by hiring returning citizens, we're afforded the opportunity to work with a diverse group of individuals. We're always looking to build our diversity at Goodwill. We have a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative right now, which is really focused on making sure that the people that are working at Goodwill actively represent the individuals, not only in our area, not only in Kent County and the other counties that we serve, but also the population that we serve in our programs. So we have a very big focus on creating an atmosphere of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're very conscious of our organization's ability to hire people who have been justice involved. Our strategic plan addresses DE&I, and we have a work team dedicated specifically to recruiting and retaining individuals with diverse backgrounds. And again, this includes returning citizens. Our first goal as an employer is to create an environment where people can be themselves and thrive. Are we perfect at it? No, but we're definitely working at it. And having it front of mind as we recruit and make hiring decisions, we're able to more directly target potential areas of need. At Goodwill, we have developed what we call a matrix, which addresses the evaluation of backgrounds in the hiring process. We utilize that, but then even if someone is determined ineligible for hire based on the matrix, we still allow the opportunity for a hiring manager to advocate for a potential employee if they think they are, extenuating circumstances to consider. So even if somebody we might not initially think is appropriate to hire, we're still going to look at them individually. We still give the person who's looking to hire them the chance to really advocate for them, because again, we want everybody to be looked at as an individual. So our goal is to screen people into a position rather than out of a position. Each person on our HR team is responsible for running background checks and determining eligibility for hire. So we're thoroughly trained on this process, so we can provide a quick and consistent determination for each job category. If we are in a position where someone is ineligible for a given position based on their background results, we look to connect them with a Goodwill service program potentially, so that we can help address their needs and reduce barriers. So even if somebody's not a fit for employment at Goodwill, we do have the other programs and services that we're able to offer, which is again a unique thing that Goodwill has that they can offer the community. Definitely big into reducing barriers both for our employees and for the individuals going through our programs. And the best first step that an employer can take, in my opinion, to hire and returning citizens is to understand what each position requires and determine which charges should actually deem an individual ineligible for hire. So a good analogy might be made to the education level question on an application. So rather than just saying every job requires a 4-year college degree, we want to look at each position individually and determine what level of education is truly needed to be successful in that role. Some entry-level positions might only require a high school diploma or no diploma at all to determine if someone is ready to fill that role. The same can be said about determining which backgrounds and charges are accepted for a given position. In this labor market, with the current job needs, again, we don't want to screen somebody out unless it's really necessary.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have a question for you. You mentioned the Employment Services Collaborative.
Yes.
And for people that are tuning in or might watch this later, can you explain how the Employment Services Collaborative could be really beneficial to returning citizens, and also how an employer might connect with that resource?
Sure. So they do have a website to connect with them. I believe it's esckent.org.
ESC Kent.org. Okay.
I'm saying that from memory, so don't quote me on that.
Okay.
But they do have a website. If you were to search the Employment Services Collaborative, just Google on the website would come up, and they have a direct way to connect with them. And again, it's 8 organizations. And what's really great about the collaborative is that it is really focused on reducing service gaps. So they have a no wrong door to services methodology. So you can come in through Goodwill, you get Goodwill services, but you also get access to the other 7 organizations. So if somebody comes in through Goodwill, either as a participant or an employee, and we determine that education level that is a barrier to potentially taking their next step in their career or even to getting an entry-level position, the Employment Services Collaborative has Jubilee jobs available, and they provide GED training and then testing. So each of the organizations within the collaborative has their own unique service that they provide in a different window or lens at which they look through to the community. So it's really about filling those service gaps and making sure that you can provide a holistic service to the individual.
So this could benefit an employer essentially, because if their employee is involved with one of these 8 organizations, their employee has access to a more holistic amount of services regarding their needs as being a returning citizens or someone that's coming home from.
Absolutely. Yep. I think that's a great way to put it. Holistic is the key word there. And because so many of the organizations within the collaborative do work with those that were justice involved, they have a kind of a keen eye for the types of supports and services that might be needed.
Okay. Well, thank you, Daniel. We are going to go ahead and take some time for Q&A. I did see that there's one question in the chat box already. Oh, it was to please remind participants to mute their phones. So I don't hear any phones right now, but if there is anybody out there that doesn't have their phone or computer muted, please do so. All right, so if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box. I have a question though. I wonder what has been the biggest learning experience in retaining, not hiring, but in retaining returning citizens?
You know, for us, I would say just the different types of issues that you come across. And it's really, none of the issues are really game breaking. It's just that there's so many different issues that you're not used to with traditional workers. So you go through one of these issues, you know, once, like this transportation issue, it's a big issue. When I first started, I had no idea. But there's some pretty easy workarounds to solve that. So that would be kind of my answer for that question.
Yeah, and I would echo that. I would say barrier resolution and how to address the different needs of returning citizens, because there is definitely consistent things that you'll see with that population. I think a lot of them were mentioned: housing, transportation, and those things can be addressed if they're pinpointed. So having a system in place where you've created an inclusive culture, where somebody feels open to telling you that they have a barrier or a need. A lot of times you'll see with employees that they don't feel comfortable talking to their employer about the fact that they don't have transportation or that they are struggling with a housing need. So it's creating that inclusive environment where they're open to talking to whoever it might be, whether that's HR. We have a program right now at Goodwill where we have individuals embedded in our stores providing supports directly to our employees related to barrier resolution. And so they can create a rapport, create a relationship with that individual and feel open to discussing what their needs might be and what kind of their next steps or dreams might be.
Yeah, I think that's great too. Building in some development pieces. Like Jason said, the front end, if you put in a lot of time and work there, you can have more success in your retention. So I think that, I mean, we always think about like investment in general as being a good idea, but when you think about investing in the front end and your employees and thinking about that in terms of retention, that's really beneficial. Another question I have is, if you could give one additional piece of advice, what would it be that we haven't mentioned? Like, how else can we support and retain non-traditional employees, specifically returning citizens?
I think it's a lot of the things that we have talked about already and probably talked about in the other webinars, being open in the hiring process, not worrying about the background until it's an absolute need, where you might be running the background check, not having preconceived notions and those unconscious bias related to individuals who were justice involved, being really open to hiring individuals that are non-traditional, and then knowing that it might take a little bit more energy to support them, but you're going to get the payoff in the end.
Okay.
You're going to find that, you know, you're going to get a hardworking employee who's dedicated to their position.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of echo that. I think it's really, it's a journey. You really just got to have an open mind. But at the end of the day, these folks are no different than your so-called traditional employees.
Mm-hmm.
They're just dealing with some different issues. I found I've kind of evolved in terms of the type of convictions that I will, hire. That's changed for me. There was a time where there were certain convictions that I was kind of staunch against. But the more time I spent in this space and around these folks, I learned that there was even more need with some of these folks that have convictions that even people that hire these type of folks traditionally shy away from.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's that open mind that's really the most important thing.
Yeah, I can't echo that strong enough. Just having an open mind about what you see on that paper is not the individual.
Right.
Everybody has their own story and their own circumstances that led to the injustice involved. So looking at everybody individually is key.
Right. And if you think too, like Jason just said, he's even begun thinking differently about what kind of criminal background he's willing to look at when he's hiring. Well, then you got to think, if my criminal background is excluding me from even more employment opportunities, it's also excluding me from even more housing opportunities or different opportunities. So it's not just making it harder to find work, it's making it harder to integrate back into society in general based on your level of, I guess, perceived risk of reoffending.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I had one additional question that I wanted to ask Jason, and Daniel, if you find anything relevant here too, that's great. But Jason, I've heard you talk about understanding the needs of your staff as not entirely different, whether or not they're returning citizens or not. I've heard you say things like, if you have to take time off for the dentist, that's not really that different than taking time off for a court date.
Right.
But I wonder, from a more practical stance, like, what does it look like to have an employee take time off for a court date? Is it short? Is it long? Is it just a communication piece?
Just that event in particular?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really doesn't have to be much different than somebody going to having an appointment, whether dentist or, whatever. It just has to be communicated. Like, hey, I'm going to need Monday morning off. I got to go down to the court. Just like an employee would say, hey, I got a dentist appointment at 4 p.m. on Tuesday. I'm going to need some time off. It's that communication. Now, there can be a challenge when you have traditional workers who start to ask questions like, why is John, getting so much time off?
Got it.
So that can be tricky. But again, it's communication. It's sitting everybody down, and our employees are aware that we have a different dynamic. So they've learned to accept it. I mean, it is what it is. And you grow together, and that's part how the culture grows, and it's part how we have unique culture. And that's refreshing for a lot of people to be in that kind of work environment. Yeah,
I would agree. I think there have been several notes made about culture and diversity and inclusion. I think that's one of those happy unintended consequences of committing to hiring returning citizens.
Yeah,
so,
unintended. I certainly didn't expect it when I got into this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if the audience has any more questions, we are about to move out of our Q&A time, so go ahead and type them in the chat box now. If not, my email address will be given at the end, and you can always reach out to us, especially if you have a specific question for one of the participants today, whether it's Jason or Daniel. And also, we're having a bit of background noise here, so I hope that's not interfering with you at all. But if it has, and for that reason you have a little bit, or you have any additional questions for us, again, feel free to shoot those to me. Okay, so we are going to take just a little bit of time before we end to have a brief moment to reflect on these questions. How does your company approach retention and success for non-traditional employees, specifically within the context of hiring returning citizens? And does this increase your talent pool? And then finally, why did you join this webinar? So if you have any questions regarding resources for hiring or supporting returning citizens in the workplace, please feel free to contact me, Tammy Britton, at the email address on the screen. And as always, watch for a follow-up survey to help us provide relevant and useful material. I will also send a few additional resources, including Talent 2025's one-pager on hiring returning citizens, and a generous and helpful tool for assessing criminal histories that was provided to us from Ellen Winterburn at Barfly Ventures. All webinar sessions will be sent out and linked on our YouTube channel. You can find us at Talent 2025. So thank you for spending part of your day with us, and enjoy your afternoon.